This one's a classic.
I've said it 1,000 times by now. Old MapleStory's design and overall balance was simply all over the place. This is common knowledge. If you didn't know to build your magician with pure int, for example, you were losing out on a lot of damage potential despite the game telling you to also add luck. But it's not just stat builds or picking the meta classes. The imbalance of old MapleStory found its way into a lot of its gear progression. Today, I want to take a look at some of these overpowered pieces of gear. One genre of gear, if you will. The overpowered maple weapons of old school MapleStory. Before we get into discussing these weapons, this video is sponsored by Eidolon. More on that at the end. In my endless pursuit to chase that feeling you get from progressing in MMOs, I'll be setting up my characters to do some AFK skilling, and we'll check back in on them soon. In April 2003, MapleStory was launched in Korea after a few beta tests in late 2002 and early 2003. Global MapleStory took a few years to release after the game's massive success in its home country and other Asian regions. This is important to remember because what we're talking about here are specifically anniversary event items. Korean MapleStory received the first round of Maple weapons in April 2004. This was before GMS even entered its beta phase. This was also around the same time that KMS received the El Nath continent actually, and in the same update as the first anniversary event, the original UI was updated to the one we all know and remember now. That old beta UI? Gone forever. Don't think about it anymore. The KMS content release timeline is very fascinating and probably worth exploring someday. Anyway, these initial first anniversary weapons were kept very simple. They were all level 35 and there were only 5 weapons released. Spearmen and bandits were inexplicably left out of this one since there was no level 35 spear or dagger. I'm not sure what caused that. Even this early on, though, we can already see a dangerous pattern slowly beginning to emerge. Let's talk about the Maple Claw. This weapon broke the rules of the claw meta entirely. It has no stat requirements, whereas a normal level 35 claw would require 70 dex to equip. Since thieves were unable to reset their dex below 25 in vanilla MapleStory, this meant an extra 45 points could be added to luck, greatly increasing damage output with Lucky 7's formula that favors that stat so heavily. This is the crux of the Dexless Assassin build and why it even works. The Maple Claw also has level 3 attack speed, one attack speed higher than most claws in the game, matching the Maba's attack speed, another claw that is arguably a little too powerful. At least the Maba had stat requirements and was a lower level. The Maple Claw essentially became one of the best options available pretty much immediately. If we go off of GMS's content release schedule, assuming KMS received the same content in their respective updates, this would mean that the highest level weapons available at this time were level 80. And since the Black Mamba only drops from Zakum, as well as monsters who were added later, as well as the fact that nobody had killed Zakum yet, most assassins were rocking scarabs, and I say assassins because third job wasn't released until a few months later, so we're still talking about second job characters. We have 2 assassins here, one with average dex increasing gear using a clean Dark Slain, and a dexless assassin with luck increasing gear using a clean Maple Claw. Some quick math shows us that they will both have an upper damage range of about 430, meaning the Maple Claw can very easily match a claw 15 levels higher than it, even with the 6 weapon attack difference and the extra luck that the Dark Slain gives. When we up this comparison to level 100, things do change, however. Our assassin using a clean scarab will have about 1000 upper damage range, and our dexless assassin using a clean level 35 Maple Claw will have about 800 upper damage range. This is of course not including certain factors like scrolling, availability and price of gear, or external damage buffs, the things that really matter in real-world scenarios. It's also worth mentioning that at this point in progression, the attack speed difference won't matter. The attack speed cap in MapleStory is 2, and both of these claws can hit that with Booster, which increases a weapon's attack speed by 2 stages. So while the extra attack speed is beneficial in early second job, before most assassins put points into Booster, even by level 50 it's no longer a major factor. If there were no level cap and players could gain an unlimited amount of ability points to add to luck, it would always be better in theory to go with the highest attack claw at endgame, regardless of its dex requirement. This is what prevents the Maple Claw from being an egregious meta-defining addition to the game. This balance of luck lost versus weapon attack gained tips in favor of normal weapons by level 70. They managed to design the Maple Claw in a way that still gave plenty of room for endgame weapons to exist, which is certainly nice, but its existence essentially still made every claw under level 70 virtually worthless. The Maple Claw set a dangerous precedent, but it wasn't the worst offender. You see, we have the Maple Staff released in this update as well. This weapon is far more overpowered than the relatively humble Maple Claw, and the reason why is far simpler and more easily explained. If you thought dexless assassins were powerful, wait until you hear about luckless magicians. Because Int was valued just as heavily as magic attack in damage calculations, Int itself became a far more valuable stat than any other class's primary stat. Most of the time, damage calculations in this game don't directly value a class's primary stat as highly as it does weapon attack. It varies and it depends on gear, total stats, etc. But for an assassin, the general rule of thumb is 5 luck equals 1 weapon attack. For a magician, 1 int equals 1 magic attack. So this new staff that didn't require the magician to add any luck essentially meant that in order to beat the damage output of the Maple Staff, the other staff, or wand, would need to have more magic attack given than luck required. And that is literally never the case for any magician weapon this early on into the game's existence. Magicians are insane, by the way. You actually don't even need this weapon to exist in order for luckless magicians to technically beat out regular builds. They can use the level 8 wand forever, and it will always be best in slot. I wish I was joking, but you can do the math yourself. There's no magician weapon that gives more magic attack than luck required. Hardwood Wand, plus 5 magic attack, minus 11 luck. Arc Staff, plus 37 magic attack, minus 44 luck. Angel Wings, plus 60 magic attack, minus 66 luck. Dragon Wand, plus 100 magic attack, minus 106 luck. Even though you gain extra magic attack from these higher level options, the loss of points added to Int that you would instead have to put into luck makes the trade-off simply not worthwhile. This is of course slightly simplified, and there is maybe an argument to be made about gear that's higher level giving you more stats overall and making up that difference, but we'll stick to this explanation for now. The Maple Staff's addition to the game did this meta no favors either. The new baseline for a luckless magician weapon now gave plus 48 magic attack instead of the wooden wand's plus 23, making these numbers look even worse for the Chad luck magicians. Then we have the somewhat more reasonable Maple weapons, such as the Maple Sword. The Maple Sword was not an extremely egregious weapon addition, especially as a one-handed sword. One of the less popular weapon type options for fighters and pages. I'd argue it wasn't even that powerful of a choice to begin with. Warrior weapons traditionally don't require secondary stats, so the Maple Sword not requiring stats is simply not a big deal. That's normal. It also had 5 attack speed, which doesn't even match the Red Whip's 4 attack speed, a far more popular option at level 35. The one thing it had going for it was the plus 20 accuracy, which is good. If you happened to be playing a sword fighter or page, this was a good option, but without any benefits beyond accuracy, given its low weapon attack, it didn't exactly dominate the warrior meta. Then there's the Maple Bow and Maple Crow. Much like the Maple Claw, the big benefits here were no stats required and an extra attack speed level above other options. And this attack speed difference did matter for archers, since they usually couldn't hit the attack speed cap with booster. Their weapons were just too slow. I don't think they ever get anything that's only 4 attack speed. There are no fancy damage formula shenanigans or extra benefits like accuracy that archers benefit from. The attack speed is cool, but these are relatively restrained additions, and these weapons could often be beat pretty easily by around level 60 when weapons start to have enough attack to justify the upgrade. And then retroactively, after the release of Pirates years later, level 35 Maple weapons were added for them, both a gun and a knuckle. These were both a little underwhelming compared to the Juggernaut Claw and Staff. Even the other less powerful Maple weapons still held greater prestige. The Maple gun's only benefit was no stat requirements, which was nice for gunslingers, but not game-changing in the way that it was for assassins. It didn't even have higher attack speed than other guns, and that did matter for gunslingers. The knuckle was much the same except for its added accuracy. Brawlers had accuracy struggles much like warriors, but they were slightly less reliant on accuracy, since they were given an extra 20 from first job's bullet time, a luxury warriors did not receive. Knuckles, unlike warrior weapons though, also required dex to equip, so the Maple Knuckles' lack of stat requirements was felt a bit more than with the Maple Sword. Both of these classes could enjoy the simplicity of not adding any points into their secondary stats until level 70 or so with the addition of these weapons. So, the Maple weapons were still doing their job of early game weapon erasure. April 2005. This was the release of the level 43 Maple weapons. Again, this was just before the full release of GMS, meaning MapleStory already had 2 anniversary events worth of weapons and items before we even had the game in the West. The level 43 Maple weapons adhered to a very similar design as the level 35 Maple weapons, both visually and in terms of their impact on the meta. They were good, but they still weren't fully encroaching on the endgame for the most part. The Maple Candayo, the level 43 Claw, has a very similar story as the Maple Claw. Before we get to the numbers though, there's a little more context that I should give. KMS first cleared Zachem on February 12, 2005, so by April 2005, the Black Mamba became a widely available weapon. It was possible that it could be acquired earlier through events or whatever means, but this made it accessible to your average hermit. Despite Ludibrium also being available at this time, Deep Ludibrium, the Path of Time area and beyond, was added a few months after this, and if we're going by the release schedule of content we received in GMS, this means that level 90 weapons weren't quite available yet. So, given all of this information, we'll use the Black Mamba as our reference point for the new endgame Claw, even though it's a weird one that gives dex instead of luck, which is basically a worthless stat for hermits. Its sole purpose is to allow equipping gear that requires dex. It doesn't contribute to damage formulas in any meaningful way outside of, like, Avenger. So as we can see, at level 100, using the same setup as before, the Mamba setup still wins. The endgame weapon of the time still dominated. The Candayo is getting closer than any level 43 weapon has any right to, but, you know, at least it wasn't best in slot. Bandits finally received a little bit of love in this update in the form of the Maple Wagner, an iconic dagger that actually doesn't really do anything particularly special. The Korean fan already existed in the game. It had been around for a while, so this was simply another stepping stone for those dexless bandits to hold on to their dexless status for a while longer. Daggers are fascinating because there are a number of them that actually don't require the normal spread of stats a thief would have. Some require a bit of strength, some require 4 all stat, which is literally impossible to not have on any character, and some require nothing at all. There's a lot to discuss when it comes to daggers in Old MapleStory. The story of the Maple Llama Staff is simple. It moved the goalpost further along by giving luckless magicians more magic attack to work with on their weapon. The further this goal was moved forward, the less viable normal magician builds became, so these Maple Staff releases actively hurt the magician meta. You could maybe make an argument for going normal dex on an assassin and using regular claws, maybe, but there was no argument for a normal luck magician build after this release. It was just too strong of a weapon that even the best magician gear that required luck to equip just couldn't win. Other classes would eventually add secondary stats to maximize their damage output at endgame, but luckless magicians were the exception to this. One fascinating thing that the developers were definitely aware of is that these magician weapons gave extra HP. Magicians are notoriously squishy. They receive magic guard and copious amounts of MP to make up for their squishiness, but these were actually widely used in Zachem runs to help magicians survive. I don't really know the specifics of this strategy, but I do know that these weapons were important for early Zachem clears. I'm gonna say something a little controversial. The level 43 Maple weapons are kind of uninteresting compared to everything we've discussed. They were cool because they gave accuracy, which is a warrior's greatest weakness, but otherwise they didn't do anything special, and the new level 43 ones were no different. The exceptions are the Maple Impaler and the Maple Scorpio, which both had pretty high attack speed and were therefore viable choices for a longer period of time. Genuinely, I would not be surprised to find a spearman rocking one of these until level 70 or higher. Not because it's the best weapon choice, rather it's because we love weapons that have fast attack speeds. Archers are similar to thieves with regards to the benefits they receive with their Maple weapons, as we learned with the level 35 offerings. No stat requirements, meaning they could go strengthless for increased damage, albeit not quite as much of an improvement as assassins receive. Faster attack speed that actually has an impact, since most bows and crossbows are 6 attack speed. The Soul Searcher boasts 5 attack speed, but the Maple crossbow inexplicably only has 6. No improvement over other crossbows in that regard. Why? Did someone at Wizit really hate crossbowmen that much? What did they do? And then there's the pirate weapons, the Maple Storm Pistol and Storm Finger. Both look pretty cool in my opinion, featuring more of a dark black aesthetic similar to the level 64 Maple weapons, which we'll discuss soon. But they're actually even less impressive. Neither of them feature an increase in attack speed over their traditional counterparts, and so the only benefits are no stat requirements and extra accuracy on the knuckle. Still good, still helpful, not game-breaking or really all that fascinating if you ask me. Alright, let's check in on my Eidolon characters. I've been really getting more and more into progressing my character's skills lately, and it's been very fun. Yes, I do still spend a lot of time and energy collecting cards. That part hasn't changed, but just look at that. I leveled up while talking about weapons that look like maple leaves. I found this game on Steam a while ago now, and I've been really enjoying progressing within it. There's a good number of skills to level and experience, which can be done passively as we've just seen. I recently unlocked World 4, for example, and gained access to the Pets skill, which you guys know I love. The mix of idle game and MMO elements is very enjoyable. I've been playing Eidolon for a while now, and it's always nice to check back in on my characters at the end of the day and see further progression. Eidolon doesn't demand as much of my time as other MMOs, and that's extremely valuable to me these days as a busy YouTuber. I can record myself playing a horror game or read through an entire video essay script and still progress in-game. Eidolon is available on both iOS and Steam, so I can hop in-game on my phone to check up on things. And whenever I'm at my computer, I can launch the game through Steam, and my account is seamlessly saved to the cloud, which is very convenient. You can play Eidolon for free on Steam using the links posted in the description and the pinned comment. Thanks again to Eidolon for sponsoring this video. In a region that's slightly more familiar, global MapleStory, it's May 2006, and we've just received our first anniversary event. This event combined KMS's first 2 anniversaries into one, meaning we received both level 35 and 43 Maple weapons at the same time, even though they were originally released a year apart in Korea. Back in Korea, April 2007 was the 4th anniversary event, and it was a big one. This was when level 64 Maple weapons were released. The builds we all know and love that I've discussed a bit in this video, such as Luckless Magicians and Dexless Assassins, were still somewhat niche builds before this time. It was only after the release of these busted level 64 weapons that they really became the dominant mainstream option for these 2 classes. And for good reason, as we're about to learn. It wouldn't be until May 2008 that we saw the release of these level 64 Maple weapons in GMS. They dropped from any monster in the game and basically defined the meta from this point onward. These weapons were so good that they could carry a player all the way to their end-game weapon of choice with ease. You wouldn't even notice any lost damage, however minuscule it was. The ideal progression of weapons was now to basically use whatever you can equip until you can get your first Maple weapon, and then only upgrade to higher level Maple weapons until you reach endgame and get your final weapon. And we've finally reached the king of Maple weapons, possibly the most recognizable and widely used out of all of them, the Maple Skanda. If nothing else, the Maple Skanda maintains a reputation as downright busted and a massive contributor to the shift towards the Dexless Assassin build. At a powerful 33 weapon attack, it was outright beating every gigantic and scarab in the game just by raw numbers, and it easily held its own against Mambas and Casters, which were now both widely available. The damage range is close, and most players simply didn't feel it was worth investing into Casters when they could simply go for the next big claw, the Red Craven. Leafree was released in July 2006 in Korea. At first, it was only the main Leafree area, not including the Dragon Nest or Dragon Canyon zones. Those were released over the next few months. This didn't matter though, as the Red Craven came with the initial release of Leafree, dropping from the Black Kintaris monsters. This made it the new endgame claw, and luckily it was capable of beating the Maple Skanda, being the first claw that most players considered worth the upgrade to equip. Just for fun, because I like doing it, I went ahead and gathered a little bit of data on what the perfect Dexless Hermit might look like at level 100. Perfect gear, including a Skanda, which could roll up to 37 attack clean. I also created a perfect low dex Hermit, and these are the results. These are relatively unrealistic gear specs to be hitting, of course, and I left out a few accessories. But what's worth mentioning here is that the perfect low dex Craven build actually ends up effectively dexless as well. Because there are so many items in the game that can be scrolled for dex, it's not impossible to have more than enough excess dex from gear to reset it all the way back down to 25. Though that level of gear optimization was only very rarely achieved by the strongest Hermits and Nightlords back in the day. At that point, the only advantage a dexless build could have would be the extra luck from gear scrolled for luck, but not everything that can be scrolled for dex can be scrolled for luck, such as shoes for example. You'd be wasting your own stats because you'd either need to scroll them for dex or scroll them for nothing because there was no other option. So there's a lot of wasted potential with an endgame dexless build. You're not optimizing everything as much as you can. Once again, we find the new Maple Claw losing out to the endgame weapon just barely. Dexless Assassins and Hermits were no longer just a niche build some players utilized. It was now the standard. If you weren't building dexless, switching to low dex when you reached level 100 or so, you were hurting your damage output and hindering yourself for no real reason, and you would never hear the end of it from other assassins. We've covered a few Maple Magician weapons already, and they've all been pretty insanely powerful. If the normal Luck Magician wasn't a dead concept already, say hello to the level 64 Maple Staff and Wand, 80 base magic attack with no downsides. After these weapons were added to the game, there was no point in ever using anything else. These were effectively end-game options until the somehow even more powerful Elemental Wands made their way into GMS after NLC's release. We can take solace in the fact that not every Maple weapon was this blatantly overpowered, as well as the fact that this contributed damage to a class who was primarily utilized for either support or farming, meaning there wasn't a huge impact on the game's overall power level with these releases. That's nice, right? Magician weapons are also unique in that their attack speed kind of doesn't impact very much. Unlike physical attackers, it didn't really matter whether the Maple Stabs and Wands had 9 attack speed or 2 attack speed. They were always going to be the best regardless. Maple Glory Sword, Maple Steel Axe, Maple Havoc Hammer, Maple Soul Rohin, Maple Demon Axe, Maple Belzit, Maple Karsten, and the Maple Soul Spear. A large number of weapons for one job, but they all fulfilled the same role. Warriors used one of these from level 64 all the way until they had the gear and accuracy to hit what they needed at endgame without them. This was often around late 3rd job, early 4th job. Again, the only benefit here was attack speed for the spear and polearm and the huge accuracy increase. The thing is, accuracy was a very important stat that warriors had to spend a lot of their early career navigating and optimizing, and these weapons kind of removed that variable. Is that a bad thing? Well, I'll leave that up to you to decide. Back to a few daggers, we have the Maple Asura Dagger and the Maple Dark Mate. By this time, bandits were often building strength for the ability to equip Kanjars, which were added to the files just a few updates earlier in version 47, so these weapons were designed to accommodate either build. The Asura Dagger gave strength, while the Dark Mate gave luck. Neither dagger gave enough of these stats to have any impact, so it was mostly down to preference and accessibility. I think they both look kind of cool, and neither of them require any stats at all, so this was simply another stepping stone in the bandit's gear progression. The Dark Mate boasted 3 attack speed, one higher than the Asura Dagger, but again, this didn't actually matter in practice. Every bandit would have maxed booster by level 64, bringing both weapons up to the attack speed cap of 2. And honestly, these weren't even necessarily the best dagger options available within this level range, as surprising as that may be. The level 65 Fan had 78 attack, only required one more level, and gave an extra 100 HP, which is actually kind of relevant because in early 3rd job, Chief Bandits would be training with Meso Explosion on really high level monsters, and those monsters hit hard. I'm telling you, dude, Chief Bandits are weird. Then we have the Maple Kandiva bow and Maple Nishada, the bow and crossbow respectively. Just like the level 43 weapons, these require no stats, and this time the crossbow was given 5 attack speed, one higher than most crossbows. As it should be. Don't know why they overlooked that with the level 43 Maple crossbow, seems a little bit mean. Finally, the Maple Cannon Shooter and the Maple Golden Claw. You know how it goes by now. No stat requirements, but no increase in attack speed for pirates. Again, a somewhat baffling decision considering what we know about basically every other Maple weapon in the game. Pirates came out too late to really enjoy the overpowered nonsense that Thieves had, for example. More Maple weapons were added after the Big Bang update, and they functioned similarly to the ones we've discussed today, but with the game's massive mechanic shifts and rebalancing, they weren't nearly as impactful. The ones we've discussed today are the biggest players, and definitely the most memorable of the group. They're iconic in a way that very few weapons in the game could ever hope to be. They were game-changing, fun, rare, and powerful, which is everything you want in a cool, collectible, event-only item. And that's something to remember. These weapons were event-only. Scarcity was their balance, and this restriction actually did make room for standard builds in real vanilla old MapleStory. When you have weapons this powerful with no restrictions on their availability, especially since they were designed around that concept, it makes sense that they would dominate the entire early game meta, suffocating gear progression and not leaving room for anything else. You're unlikely to find very many assassins rocking a gigantic when they could just go buy a Skanda for 1 million mesos. But in true vanilla old school MapleStory, Maple weapons were far more special than that. Overpowered? Absolutely. But when they're not widely available for anyone to acquire whenever they feel like it, their impact is not felt the same way. They become a cool, powerful novelty item rather than being the baseline standard. It's nice to take a good look at how Maple weapons actually impacted the game and learn that, surprisingly, they were actually a little bit more balanced than I thought.